This is a PowerPoint on dual class legendaries. Starting with Ace Hunter Kreen in Demon Hunter. You already know how this is going to go if you know the order of these, but it's going to be fun to for people that don't know what's about to happen. So Ace Hunter Kreen was pretty bad. There's no reason to play this in basically either class. It just being able to make your other characters immune while attacking was genuinely not that useful for the decks that existed at the time for both of these classes. You know, you'd rather just play face for Demon Hunter. You played Soul Fragment Demon Hunter, significantly better. And then in Hunter, Hunter didn't really exist very much in Skull and Man's Caddy. It was fine, but, you know, there's a reason everyone said it was the Demon Hunter Warrior show for these first two expansions. It really was. Those are the only really great decks, so it's hard to, compete with them, but it's not like Kreen was playable anyway. You know, in Wild, it's terrible. In Standard, as time went on, it was terrible. It's just really bad card, which is very ironic because it's actually named after Hunter Ace, who won in 2019. So to get a really bad legendary feels quite awkward for a winner, especially when you consider someone like Lyoun got Machnathal Lion, which eventually became one of the best cards in all of Wild, which is very, very hilarious. Then, for Hunter, you have Shando Wildclaw. Shando Wildclaw, again, just really bad. It didn't get played in either class. It's all about, either buff your beasts, which, Druid was doing anyway with Survival of the Fittest, or you would copy your beasts, which was completely useless because why would you want to do that? You're not really running very many beasts, and the ones you are running, had rush, so they would kill themselves off, stuff like that. Shando Wildclaw just saw absolutely no play in either class, just didn't do anything. Like, again, it's one of these cards where I'm just like, what were they thinking with it? It doesn't really make sense for anything that was going on in Standard at the time, and it's just not a good card. Then, for Druid, we have Speaker Gidra. In Druid, Gidra was actually quite good. You had a lot of different, aggro token Druids that popped up around this time. Due to getting a lot of support through a bunch of different expansions, getting Shaman cards actually did help a little bit, but it was fine. You could have your Arbor up or your Blessing of the Ancients. That would be really big spells to spell burst with Gidra that did see play at these times. That was fine. Gidra wasn't amazing. Eventually when you had, Forge in the Barrens and you had that kind of taunt token Druid, Gidra just didn't really slot into that deck. So it's not like it was an amazing card. It was more just a product of its time, and, they're not being really anything better. But as better cards came out, Gidra instantly just fell to the wayside. In Shaman, Gidra saw, I think genuinely zero play. I might be wrong about that, but I can't think of anything that would have ever ran Gidra. It's just not useful. It's a slow removal tool that relies on having, more spells to make it actually tick, and then it's just not great. Gidra is a very weird card, and the way that it was in Shaman really tells you it's not very good. I don't think that Gidra I think if Gidra were a good card, it would be incredibly toxic too, as well. If this card were something like 2 mana, of course it would be incredibly broken, but it's hard to think about how you would buff Gidra without making it, incredibly overpowered, so I think, it being bad is kind of good for the game. Then, for Shaman, we have Ra's Frostwhisper. Ra's is actually pretty decent in spell damage Shaman, that existed around these times. Mage also could make some use of it, but it wasn't more of a Shaman card when it existed. And the real kicker is this is the main reason that Odd Shaman existed was Ra's Frostwhisper. You would get, the odd cost hero power, which makes it so you can choose the totem, so you'd always pick Wrath of Air, spell damage totem. You would copy it, you would use a lot of different spell damage benefiting effects, but it was mainly trying to get Ra's Frostwhisper down on the board. It would fight incredibly well because it would be dealing, 3-4 damage to all enemies at the end of the turn, and it just dealt a lot of damage. This card would add up to damage, just a crazy amount, because those spell damage totems wouldn't really die, because you would buff them up with, Totemic Reflections, which eventually came, and it was pretty decent. I'm not gonna lie, Odd Shaman was genuinely pretty decent, and Ra's was the main key drive of that. Of course, this card just doesn't see any play nowadays, but even if Odd Shaman were playable, I don't think Ra's would go in the deck. It's just so slow. This card it's weird. If this card were 4 mana, it would probably be pretty decent. For 3 mana, it would be incredibly broken, but you can't play it in Odd Shaman if it's 4 mana, so it is a bit unfortunate for that. Then for Mage, you have Janice Barov. Dude, this card, unreal. This card is genuinely great. It's at like entire run in both in Standard. It saw a lot of play in Wild where you had like Odd Rogue running it. Genuinely just a great card. It's funny because its best expansion was definitely Forge of the Barons, where like people really thought that Janice could get nerfed to like 6 mana based on Forge of the Barons like Rogue. You would cycle through your deck, you play incredibly tempo heavy, and of course Janice Barov being this gigantic stat bomb of a minion that would also draw you cards with your field contact, stuff like that. It was actually really strong, and in both classes, Mage can make use of it as well, just because it's such an overstated minion. You get your random 5 cost, you get a 2/1 on top of it, and then if that minion you summon had Rush, you could just pick that one and it wouldn't matter, because you kill it off. If that Divine Shield, it still survived that because it didn't take 1 damage because of the Divine Shield. If one of the minions was Taunt, you would always pick the other one, so it was really hard to get through. Janice was just really good, and if you didn't play at the time, it's hard to quantify how good Janice is, because I don't think a card like this would be that good in today's game, even in Standard. I think Janice would be too slow for Standard nowadays. At 4 mana, I think this card would be good. It would be very solid in Wild, but I don't think it would be that... it wouldn't be broken by any means. In Standard, 4 would probably be too strong, but, Then, for Rogue, you have Dr. Krasinov. This card is actually pretty good. It saw play in Bomb Warriors. It was sometimes ran in Swine Tusk Shank Rogue, Poison Rogue from Version of the Barons. That deck was actually very fun, I'm not gonna lie. When United in Stormwind mini set came out with Dr. Smite, you could play a weapon rogue that was all about getting your smites. You would bounce smite, you would play your Blood Sail Raider to give your weapon like a lot of attack, you would bounce those, then in 1 turn you would just play 2 Blood Sail Raiders, maybe one of them is discounted from Shadow Step, or maybe your Dr. Smite, your Mr. Smite is discounted from Shadow Step. You'd play all those in 1 turn, you would hit your opponent in the face with your weapon, and you would kill your opponent from like 30-something damage in a weapon deck that was very hard to deal with, because weapon removal was really bad, even with Rust-Rot Viper being in the game, which is very ironic. Krasinov, of course, was sometimes ran in that deck. It wasn't great in that list, but it is still had its uses. But mainly, you were just playing towards, buffing your weapon some kind of way with Dr. Krasinov. You do the bombs and Bomb Warrior. It was just pretty good. This card just was really good at its job. It gave you +1/+1 on your weapon, and it killed a minion. That's pretty good. Most cards would in Hearthstone would just like to be a pretty good card, and Dr. Krasinov, that's what it is. Pretty good card. Then for Warrior, we have Lord Barov. This is possibly it is the best card on this list. Like, I know I put probably, but that's just, a little bit of clickbait, stuff like that. It is the best card on this entire list. It's one of the best legendaries ever printed. I'd say easily top, 50 of all time. It's incredibly powerful. So, Barov still sees play in, your control warriors, your skipper warrior sometimes runs Barov, your control paladins run Barov. It's just really good. This card synergizes incredibly well with, Animated Broomstick, in both classes. Animated Broomstick, because it came out at the same time, just synergized incredibly well with Barov. It worked well with Whirlwind effects, worked well with City Tax once you got to United and Stormwind. It was just really, really, really good. Lord Barov is just great card. I don't know what else there is to say. It did exactly what it needed to do incredibly well, because you could sometimes kill your own Barov to kill the board. Or you could just play Barov and then trade it off on the next turn, and that sometimes was good enough. Barov just did everything you needed it. It was such a powerful tool, and then, I don't think that decks like, Libram Paladin would have been as good if they didn't have Lord Barov, which says a lot for a deck that powerful that existed for so long. Then for Paladin, we have High Abbess Allura. Allura was actually really good. This card, let me rephrase. It was really good in one deck. You would run, either, you would run either, Last Kaleidosaur or Making Mummies. Then you would have High Abbess Allura, and your only spell in your deck being Tip the Scales. Tip the Scales, if you don't know, it's an 8-mana Paladin spell that reads summon 7 Murlocs from your deck. Of course, it'll only be 6 because Allura's on the board, but that was just really good. That was an insane amount of tempo. You would summon a lot of, big Murlocs. You would summon Chargers. You would summon the Bluegale Warrior or old Murk-Eye, and then you would summon Murloc War Leaders, stuff like that, and you would just deal a lot of damage to your opponent. It was really hard for them to deal with, and you would, because you had so many Murlocs, you could just be able to try and, win the game through that. It was actually a very good deck. Saw a lot of play for a while. I'm not too sure what caused that deck to fall off. It might have just straight up been, it became too slow. I'm not too sure. I actually genuinely don't remember why that deck stopped seeing play. If anyone knows, that would be really nice, but I just can't think of it off the top of my head. Of course, in Standard, this card didn't really see any play at all. It's just not that great. Its effect is fine, but it's hard to build your deck around. Incredibly hard at the time, so it didn't really see very much play. Then, for Priest, we had Disciplinarian Gandling. I think this card was experimented with in Shadow Priest. I think. That's all I got. I don't remember if this card saw any play whatsoever. It might have seen play in Dark Moon Fair Aggro Warlock or Zoo Warlock, maybe there, but I really don't remember if this card saw any play. It's such a nothing card that I genuinely can't remember it. It's weird because a lot of the other bad cards, I'm like, oh yeah, this card actually did see no play, but Gandling, I'm just like, I can't remember. That obviously doesn't sound very good because if it was a card that did see play, it would be significant. So I'm not too sure if it did, but if anyone remembers Gandling, that would be nice, but I don't really have much to say. It's kind of just not that interesting an effect. After you play Mini Destroy It, summon a R4 failed student, that's fine. It's not a terrible card, but it's definitely not... It's not anything special or flashy that would have caused me to remember it, so I genuinely cannot tell you. Sorry about this one. This happens sometimes with a lot of these older cards that are, really mixed together with a lot of other ones, dual-class legendaries, that sometimes you just don't remember, and there aren't any resources to go back to and just be like, oh, yeah, this card was blah, 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 how good it was, unless you want to go through, Vicious Syndicate reports, which didn't really tell you actually how good cards were, kind of just showed you, deck lists and was like, yep, Warlock was good, or Warlock was bad, or, my favorite is just oh, Shaman's so bad, we're not going to make a thing about it, so, there's no real resources to do this stuff, so it's kind of just off the dome, and I can't remember anything for Gandling. But last and not least, we have Sociologist Militia, taking us all the way to Warlock and back to Demon Hunter. Sociologist Militia was actually really good in both decks. Soul Fragment Demon Hunter was the best deck in Skullman's Academy, period. It's really good. It saw a lot of play in slower Warlock decks, in Dark Moon Fair, and kind of just that, to be honest. Like I said before, Soul Shard Demon Hunter and Druid and Warrior kind of ran the show in Skull and Mance, so there's not really that much that you could say for other classes. It's kind of a bit awkward that that did happen, but Militia was just still really good in Warlock. It was incredible. It was incredible in Demon Hunter. Don't get me wrong. It was great. Of course you were playing Soul Shards, so there was no reason not to play it. Generated you a big board. It was just really good. But in Warlock, it still did all those things. It's just Warlock wasn't as good. Of course, Darkwind Fair, you had all the slower Warlock stuff, and Militia was pretty good in those decks. But just for Demon Hunter alone, Militia is very, very, very good card. What's funny is they actually reprinted a new version of this, with the Tram Conductor Gary, whatever. It's based on if you've excavated twice and then fill your board with 3/3 with Rush. I don't remember if Jerry's 5/5. I think it might be a 4/4. But that card also was fine at best. It lived and died by Azurite Snake, and Azurite Snake got nerfed, so Jerry saw no play after that. So Militia kind of feels the same way. I do like Soul Fragments a lot. I'm not gonna lie. I think that if they were to bring back one of these mechanics from around then, I would very much want Soul Fragments to be back. They're just really cool. Having your Marrow Slicer into Soul Shard Lapidary, I think it's called, the 5-mana 5/5 that gives you +5 attack for a Soul Fragment in your deck. That was a really, really strong curve. It was part of the main reason why Demon Hunter was so strong. You would play a 4/2 weapon on turn 4, and then on turn 5, you would play a 5/5 that gave you 9 damage, including your weapon. It was incredibly broken, and I'm not sure how that stayed, and the only nerf they made to it was to Shatter Shard Mystic, which was from 3 to 4 mana. Crazy stuff. But yeah, that's going to be it from me. If you enjoyed, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Tell me what you think down below. Tell me your favorite Hearthstone card is down below to enter my pre-order bundle giveaway for Perils in Paradise. It's coming out on July 23rd. You can also join my channel as a member to enter a giveaway for it that way. Of course, if you don't know what a member is, it's similar to a Twitch subscription. And yeah, that's going to be it for me, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.
Rising again! Darker than they've ever been.